Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Unsold Podcast. And today we have a very special guest, all the way from Canada. See, as far as I understand, there are three great Ryans from Canada: Ryan Reynolds, Ryan Gosling, and I'm talking to the third one today.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if I have this swagger and looks as those two, but I'll do my
Oh, you
best.
do. Oh, you do. Absolutely. All
Thank
right,
you.
Ryan. So, can you give us a background about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I primarily am a marketer.
Mhm.
I focus in the B2B space, and I've been in B2B for over 2 decades. You name it, though, I've probably done it.
Mhm.
Also sales, business development. I've worked in a lot of capacities, companies big and small. I took a small detour as an investigative reporter for 3 years at radio and TV here in Canada. But now today, what I do is I'm a customer investigator, and I run B2B customer investigations. And my tool for that is one-on-one interviews. And it's really just to help companies, figure out how and why their best buyers buy, and then how they can build a pipeline of these people to turn them into customers over the long term.
Right. Right. Thank you. That's fascinating. So I think one aspect of conducting these interviews is to understand, obviously, the customer point of view and also unpack the buyer journey for B2B businesses, correct?
Yeah. That's a big part of what I do. Yeah. I try to understand, I'm sure we'll get into this a bit more, but what I try to really understand is what is the process they go through. They
Mhm.
mean a buyer, an ideal
Correct.
customer,
Correct.
from them prioritizing a problem to solve, because it's
Mhm.
not necessarily, companies don't necessarily just wake up one day and buy a thing. What happens is they prioritize addressing different issues in their business processes over the course of months and years. So I want to figure out
Mhm.
like why they choose to fix this thing over that thing. And
Right.
then what is the process of them whittling all their options down into picking possibly a vendor for a solution or a
Right.
service? Because that process can take anywhere from up to a few months to a couple of years. And the reason I
Right.
want to understand that is if I can understand all those steps and the narrative of that, then I can influence that with my marketing and sales in B2B.
Right. Spot on. Exactly. So I think the next question is kind of a nice segue. I think if we look at the current buyer journey for a B2B business, I mean, it has evolved a lot, even when compared to about 4 or 5 years ago, let's say pre pandemic. So, according to you, in your opinion, how has it evolved? How
Ooh.
complex? I'd say the buyer has more autonomy today to take actions, whereas compared to 10 years ago. So, how has it evolved?
Yeah. So some things have changed and some things have not, based on
Mhm.
my lived experience and sort of what I see in my work.
Mm.
And let's back up a bit. So when I started
Right.
20 years ago,
Mm.
in the age when like fax machines were still what we used to communicate, across the oceans, emails
Right.
weren't really a thing yet. Um, how I used to buy, because I was a purchaser of a lot of services in B2B, I negotiated large scale contracts with vendors. Some of them were worth upwards of like $1 million.
Mm.
So my options to what you just said for understanding, or the avenues and channels and the sources of information I had for understanding my options were limited.
Mm.
I had to speak with other vendors, go to trade shows, trade
Right.
media. What's different now is and it might take me like, a couple months to build a short list of options. Now there is hundreds of ways I can get information, and I can build a short list of options in 5 minutes if I wanted to.
Mm.
So that's what's changed, is the access that people have to information, the
Mhm.
buyers. Before, vendors controlled a lot of the access of the information, the flow of information. Now it's reversed. Buyers can go on and get everything needed in a few minutes. I
Mhm.
think what's the same, though, and what has not changed, is buyers are still preferred to deal with, their peers, communities of people in their space. Because remember, this is B2B. So there's professionals that have a certain skill set, and they look to their peers who are also doing similar things for answers and solutions. So they look to communities, vendors, and their peers, trying to understand from them like what their options are. And then they'll sort of whittle through. They want to understand their options are and establish also like, do the options I have, if it's a vendor, do they understand my world? Do they seem credible? Do they feel like a good business partner over the course of a few months or a few years? Those things are all the same. None of that has changed. It's just how we access that information has changed. So I think that's one of the key things. And if I may, and take a while to answer your question, but I just wanted to put this one point. The software, early adopters to the internet, I think, had an advantage in the market in the last 10 years. Whereas people who started a few years ago, they might remember we called it digital marketing. People still do, right? Because at the time it was a channel, right? The internet was just part of the marketing mix. But now the internet is the default place of how we run economies in most worlds, right? Like the technology is the default for how we communicate and how we exchange money and everything. It drives all our transactions. So now, as everyone's moved into it, I think people who had that early adopter, advantage of the internet, that's gone. So I think you're seeing a lot of shift back to the fundamentals of marketing and sales, the first principles of how people are applying them in their marketing strategy. So those are the things I think that have changed. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question,
Right.
but I wanted to just lay that out there.
Right. Power to the buyer. And considering this power to the buyer, where a buyer opens up a tab on a browser and there are different digital channels where he or she can consume content, how challenging it is to map buyer journeys for marketers from a marketer's perspective today.
I mean, it can be tough. It really depends on a few things. So, the stage of your company, how many, so stage meaning like how big you are and the maturity of your product in the market, who you're selling into, and, where the resources you have. I try not to get too hung up though on channels. And the reason I don't is in B2B, there's only so many, right? Because it's not like consumer products where you have infinite number of things. Like there's very few B2B companies that are going to buy a billboard, right? Unless they're like Microsoft or, Salesforce. So the channels are very few and far between. I think what's more important when, you're trying to understand how to be successful as a B2B marketer is what are the things they need to make informed decisions at each stage of intent. So let me give an example. If I buy, let's stick with Salesforce. Salesforce is not like the sales process. Salesforce is just part of sales, right? HubSpot is just part of marketing. So you need to understand like how these tools and how your tool or solutions of service fits inside the processes of your buyers, because that's where you start to influence people, people who are buyers. Now the channels they go to are probably going to just be like LinkedIn, maybe Twitter, maybe a community, a few peers, might go to Reddit. There's a few more. But what's more important than the channel, honestly, is like, what is the thing you're saying at what point in time to influence their decision making? So, I mean, for mapping out channels, I know I didn't really answer your question, but I mean, I don't really look at them as the key part of the marketing mix. They're good to know, but that's not what's going to make or break your marketing at the end of the day.
Right. Fantastic. And what role does the CRM play in understanding the journey?
Yeah. I look at CRM as like performative data. Mm-hmm. So CRMs, dashboards, Google Analytics, anything that has like quantitative data. My philosophy is that just really tells you how marketing is doing. It doesn't really tell you how to do marketing. There's a distinction there. And the reason is, if you look at this things that we capture in CRMs, the data we capture in CRMs are activities that have happened. So we're gauging the progress, but it's what's happened in the last 10 years is we've defaulted to dashboards as sort of like our source of truth of, how to inform our marketing activities. Whereas I like to say, the work that I do, which is we get data that like surveys, dashboards don't get, which is the voice of the customer work, the jobs to be done in the business, their processes, how they select vendors. Those are the pieces, those are the data that, impact your marketing activities further upfield. But then your CRM is going to help you measure whether the things you're putting out in the market are actually effective, because you'll have the data to understand how your programs are performing.
Right. I mean, this is a nice segue to, at the center of it all is to deeply understand the customer, the buyer. So
Yeah.
coming to what you do, your expertise, talking to
Yeah.
customers, conducting interviews, what makes an effective customer interview?
I look at interviews in 5 parts. So 5 steps. The first is you really need to understand like what you want to talk about and why. So another way of saying that is, or a more formal way of saying that is like, what are your objectives? What are your research objectives? Because what I do is in the academic world, it would be called qualitative research, not quantitative. And qualitative is really just sort of, things like focus groups, interviews, more open-ended questions where you have a longer in-depth analysis that you have to conduct with the answers. So that's the first part is like, what do you want to know and why? Because you can have a conversation with a customer about all sorts of things. And most interviews last 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And you can fill that time very quickly talking about things that are relevant to the business or things that you need to do. So a really good example is, if you're in a leadership team meeting and you're worried about the number of conversions that your website is bringing to the sales team. Let's just say that your go-to-market motion is someone fills out a request form and they get demos from a sales team, and you're converting like 15%. Well, that could be a signal that, okay, we need to understand what's happening at that part of the journey where people are looking at their website. We want them to fill a demo form and they're not. Right. What I'm not talking about in that conversation with customers is onboarding, customer experience, how they perceive our brand. I don't care about any of that. I just want to focus on that one piece, and I can fill a full half-hour interview just focusing on why people are looking at our marketing and our website and not converting. Because then I can use those insights and inform what I want to do with the business. So that's like the first part, what I want to know. And then who am I going to talk about? The second part is, who am I going to talk to? Because if I talk to prospects, I'm going to get different answers than if I talk to people who have been my customer for 5 years, right? Or 5 months. Because those people have different insights and different biases and different experiences with your business. So you need to understand, okay, if this is what I want to know, who's going to give me those answers? Third part is you got to go conduct the interview. And there's a whole process to that. And there's techniques you can use to help really succeed in that environment. The fourth is I got to take all the data and I got to analyze it. And then the fifth is I got to make actions out of that data. So that's the 5 parts. But when you're conducting an effective interview, it's those first 3 that really make or break what you're going to do with this environment.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I'm sure some companies would attempt to conduct customer interviews on their own, and maybe that may not lead to the ideal success. What are the common mistakes or pitfalls in conducting customer interviews?
Sort of goes back to what I just talked about, but I'll expand a bit more. So one is, let me start with a story first. So one of the reasons I do what I do, or where the idea came from, I was working with a software company, and I had a conversation with a product marketer. They were a junior product marketer. And I was doing other work for that company on the content side and positioning, messaging side. But I was working at their office, and I struck up a conversation with this junior product marketer, and they said, "Oh, I just did a customer interview yesterday. I'm really excited about it, and it was great." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. What did you learn?" So they showed me a piece of paper with like 3 sentences on it that didn't really have much depth around like it's just, and they're all just sort of opinions about the product. And I was like, okay, it's a good start. Uh, do you have the recording? And we can listen to it. Oh, no, I didn't record the call. So there's a lot of ways that people fall down here, because I think how they treat it is when we talk to interviews, that when we do interviews with customers, they treat it as sort of like a networking call or a friendly chat. And it should sort of feel that way, but that's not what your objective is. Your objective is research. So the first thing is you need to really understand what you want to talk about and create guardrails around keeping the conversation in that vicinity. So let's just take that conversion example that I talked about. So all my lines of questioning and everything I want to talk about is within that part of the experience. So I don't ask questions about onboarding, and if they want to go into onboarding, I bring them back. You keep the conversation focused. So that's one key thing. The second is I don't want opinions. I want actions, behaviors, timelines, and processes, because that's what businesses mostly are. There's just a bunch of different processes and people doing work to achieve an objective. If I ask people opinions about my product or service, that doesn't really help, because they're all subjective. Everyone will have a different sort of take on them, and that I can't aggregate the data and action it to like what I want to do with my marketing and sales. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, when you're conducting these interviews in real time, you want to record them. You want to ask a lot of open-ended questions. Ask one question at a time, because humans have a tendency to double up their questions. So an example would be, tell me about when you first heard about our product and what you think of it after you bought it. Well, those are 2 questions. Actually, there's almost 3. And what happens with people's cognitive ability is that it's really hard for them to discern, like, okay, well, what's important in that question to answer, right? And they're doing it subconsciously, and you might not get all the insights you need. So, like, one thought in the question, record the call is like a big thing, like we're doing now, right. You want to ensure that you speak with enough people to get the insight saturation is a term we use in quality research. So you have enough insights to action to the business. So those are some really high level tips I think that can help you make an effective interview.
Fantastic. Now, what are the chances of speaking to people who have already spoken to before and speaking to people for the very first time? Right?
What do you mean?
When you speak, for example, see, when our psychology is, whenever we set up a call to talk
Mhm.
about something related to business or a particular product,
Yeah.
how easily do people open up, and how do you extract genuine,
Yeah.
authentic responses?
So
How challenging is it?
I think it depends on how you approach it and who you're talking to. So, if you're talking to a customer that has been with you for some time, and you're tracking, you have a good understanding of their success, either in their business or with your product. Right? The odds of them providing genuine answers, opening up, to use your words, would be higher, because they're excited about what they've been able to achieve with what you've provided, the value you've provided them. If you reverse that, one of the things in my work I always say to clients is, do not send me people that have had a poor experience, because then it turns into them venting about their experience, which they're allowed to do as a paying customer. But that's not the objective that I have. It's their customer success team, their product team, whoever should be listening to that person so they can actually solve their problems. When it gets to, say, prospects in market, I mean, that's often sometimes less. They're a bit more guarded about what they share. Some of it, so they just don't know, because if they don't have any experience with your product, they might not have the knowledge, and they just know about the category. But at the end of the day, my experience has been that most people, if you are in an environment where you're not pitching to them and they don't feel like it's a sales conversation, or sometimes now people will do things where they'll reach out and say, I just want to show you a tool and we're doing research. And then it turns into a product pitch, which is like a big no-no. If they feel that energy in the air, they will be more guarded. But if it's really sincerely you just trying to understand their mindset, how they think, how their business works, I always find people are very open with their answers. That's been my experience.
Right. Understood. I think flipping this on the other side, the natural tendency for B2B businesses is to pitch their product.
Yeah.
Especially because of the lack of insight, the buyer insight. So if we don't know what type of target we are hitting, what we do is we reach to our quiver and the only arrow we have in it, which is our product. That's what we lead with. As and when we collect more information, more insights about our customers or prospects, I think then we start aligning with what they want. We start consulting rather than just shoving stuff directly. Correct? And it's fascinating. One stat I just love about what you do is that you have conducted more than 1,900 customer interviews. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah, some of
Wow,
that now, some of that is when I was a reporter. So I have to 900 interviews, but I'm definitely in like multiple hundreds of customer interviews for sure.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, once, as and when you collect insights over, let's say, the 100 plus, more than 100 interviews you have collected, how do you turn whatever you gather into actionable, implementable ideas? So what's the best way to integrate insights into especially the marketing and the sales side of the business?
This is how I do it. I lean into a philosophy people call jobs to be done. Everyone can Google it. There's a lot on that topic and on that sort of framework and philosophy. And the sort of the foundational element of that philosophy is, in businesses, even in consumer products, but I'm going to stick with B2B, there are things that they're trying to achieve within the business, specifically to get, designed outcomes, concrete outcomes. And there are processes, tools, whatever it is that help them get that job done. So a lot of jobs to be done philosophy it was born out of the innovation side of how we build products. But I like it for understanding, how do they get things done in a business? I'm going to tie this to the action side. So let me give you an example. On my site, contentlift.io, I have what I call my one case study. And it was with a software company here in Ottawa called Rewind, Ottawa, Canada. And they had built the business very well as a Shopify app for a few years, and they were looking at expanding. So they made their first acquisition of another product. And their core value proposition is they back up software products like Shopify, all the data in like Shopify, GitHub, Confluence, Jira. It's like a redundancy to the data backups that are in the cloud. So I was tapped with figuring out like how they're going to sell this into the market and talk to some of their customers, because when they acquired the software, the sales forecasts were not tracking with where they hoped they would track. They weren't generating the revenue they hoped. So the intelligence we had at the time from the founding team that built this product, but then sold it to Rewind, was which was a GitHub product. Software developers are going to want to back up their code repositories. Okay, fair enough. So that's our hypothesis. Let's go see if that's true. When we talked to them at large, there were a few here and there that were early adopters that really thought the technology was fun and cool and neat and interesting. Yeah, that sounds good. But for the most part, none of them cared. Because how because of how their jobs worked, they didn't need their business models or how their jobs worked. There was no incentivization. There was no concern about them losing their code repository data for whatever reason. But when we talked to some people who did really like the software, they were IT professionals and DevOps professionals. And the reason they liked it is because they were on the hook for having to restore this data, and the process of restoring this data, which was a manual process if they could restore the data. So they didn't want to take that off their plate, that manual process, because the job they wanted to get done was they wanted to just be able to service other parts of the business without dealing with the software development team. So why does that have to do with anything I'm talking about when it comes to marketing? So what we understood was there was a core part of the process that they were hitting in that them wanting to back up their code repositories that was not being reflected in their marketing. So we changed a lot of things. We changed our marketplace listings, our landing pages, our ads, reflecting those core problems that people were facing. So we no longer talked about backing up your code repository. We talked things about like, stop trying to do X, stop trying to do Y, stop trying to do this. If this is your job, this is what we have for you. We're speaking more to their language as opposed to just talking about the product. We're talking about the things they want to get done. That's how we integrate these things to marketing and sales actions. Because if you just talk about the product, what it does in your marketing, it might not make sense contextually for people who don't necessarily understand what that thing does in the beginning. I hope I answered the question. Let me know if I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it, let me make a comment. Is it fair to say that at least in India, with the B2B SaaS companies I work for, this idea of working with an outside partner, buying or subscribing to a software will happen primarily for two reasons. One is there is a genuine problem. Either they have dealt with solving it in-house and they figured, you know what, they need a more stable solution and better to partner with somebody outside. Or if there is no immediate problem, there is a mandate to take action, pretty much becomes more compliant.
Yeah.
So like how accounting software is compliance, every business needs one. So is it fair to say that these two are the most common reasons why buyers are open to investing in buying B2B softwares?
I think so. I mean, most B2B transactions are like, when you break them down to their core, it's, are you going to do something in the house, or are you going to outsource?
Right.
Doesn't matter what it is. You either build the infrastructure inside the company and use your resources to do that, or you bring in a partner to do that. And there's various reasons why you would or would not do that, right? Think of it if manufacturing. I can build a manufacturing plant and build my own widget, or I can outsource the widget to someone else and I can just do shipping and delivery, right? It's, at the end of the day, those are typically your choices. Compliance is interesting because I see more of that, generally speaking, across, companies. I find compliance typically becomes a thing more in the enterprise world, where, mandates come down because we need, if we want to land customer X, that's typically where most of these things come from. We want to have this customer, or we want to sell into this market. As part of the terms of agreement and the service level agreements, they want to see X, Y, Z in our company, whatever those things are. So again, then it comes down to, okay, well, we can build the thing inside, or we can outsource the thing to appease this potential prospect. So I think you're right. But the crux is, you still need to figure out, how do these things contextually fit into the business, right? So like I sort of talked about before with Rewind, one of the key things we learned was that software companies with a certain amount of developer resources, software engineer resources, most of them will try to build their own version of what Rewind does. Fair enough, right? And we know that most of them the tool's not going to be as good as ours, but they've made that decision internally to do that. But when there's other verticals like healthcare, there's finance, where they don't have the deep bench of software engineers that software companies do, they're not going to spend time building these tools in-house. So, you have to find the match for your product of where it actually fits in what market, what business model, what ideal buyer. Just because if you hold a software company, if I'm a chief technical officer, an IT director of IT for a hospital, or a director of IT for a software company, my jobs to be done and what I'm trying to do are probably dramatically different, right? So your solution might not fit in one vertical, but fits very well in another, right? So yeah, those are use cases that I typically see, but you still have to zero in like what they're doing. Why would they outsource, in what circumstances, and what circumstances would they build it in-house, and why?
Right. Fantastic. Now, I think I want to talk about companies who actually see value in conducting interviews, especially at the beginning with their customers and also on the prospective side. Um, I'm sure before figuring out to work with an expert like you, if at all they attempt to do it on their own, one of the common challenges probably might be lack of expertise or the lack of bandwidth per se. So for
Yeah.
such companies, how do you advise to start to put that proper foundation to conduct interviews?
Yeah, there's other issues too, but from the bandwidth side, the one piece of advice I have is you don't need to talk to many. People will debate how many customers you need to interview to extract insights that help you make informed decisions in the business. If you look at the research on what I do, which is qualitative research, there are studies on what's the ideal sample size to pull to get qualitative insights that you can action. On average, if you talk to 7 people, you'll start to actually get some insights you can action. Just 7. So you can almost do that in a week. Once you get to 12 or 15, you'll hit what they call insight saturation. So if you plotted all your learnings from an interview on a bell curve, you would start to dip down the other side of the bell curve around 12 to 15. You'd capture about 90 to 95, 99% of the learnings. The reason I say that as addressing bandwidth is that then it becomes a bit more tenable to say we only need to talk to 7 people really at the very minimum. And then that sort of takes a bit of the weight off people's shoulders, because I've seen companies where they say, no, we got to talk to 40 people. I mean, you can, absolutely, but there's diminishing returns. And I know what it's like to have to go back through a 45-minute conversation and try and map out all the patterns and insights. It takes time. You can do more now with ChatGPT or other language LLMs. That's really helped. But you still need to sort of go into them, absorb it yourself, and find the nuance, because the AI tools, they sort of provide generalities. They don't offer a lot of substance and contextual understanding. That's fine. That's just not what the models really do well. So, from a time perspective, I think that's a good one. And the other one you often see is a lot of pushback, right, from either executives, other teams, around, well, we don't want you bothering our customers. And I understand, we can maybe get into the bit, but I've seen that sort of pushback for years. So I often say, like, baby steps are things like if you have sales calls that are recorded, customer service calls that are recorded, you've done some surveys, you have reviews, anything you could do to get nuanced language, you could take a lot of that, pull it together, and start there and say, and that's one thing I've done with other companies. You find patterns in sales calls and say, you know what, this thing is popping up a lot, and we don't have a lot of understanding of what this process or term or why they keep saying this in sales calls. I'd like to go understand more, because I feel like we can use this, and we could probably use that in a marketing somehow. And that opens up the door to having maybe those 7 conversations with customers.
Right. Right. Interesting. I think one aspect which I'm very interested to pick your brain on is it fair to say that some of the interviews you conduct come through as references through from your client? Say, go and talk to this and such a person, and the other half is you have to establish a connection, you have to pitch and get them to talk to you. Is it fair to say that?
Can you ask that again? Like, is it?
Sometimes, do you get referrals from your clients and say these are
Oh,
a bunch of customers, and
yeah,
then these are the people you should talk to? And sometimes they say on the prospective side, for example, or even at the customer side, we
yeah,
know this is our customer, this particular business is a customer. You go establish a connection with, let's say,
yeah.
three
Okay,
people within this company. And what
yeah.
is your pitch? How do you?
We do both. I do both. And they just offer different benefits, pros and cons, right?
Right.
So with customers, it's often easier if someone in the company introduces me to one of their customers and I can run and do the interview. That's usually the fastest to get someone because there's a relationship already. They'll probably have a positive view on the category or the company in general, and I can run that interview pretty quickly. And get the insights they need. They'll also know the company well, which is good. I can do the other way, where, and I'm doing that now for a client where I'm running a project where I'm trying to understand a specific thing about commercial construction and soil, and I'm trying to speak with structural engineers in the United States. I don't have a client list because they want me to go and speak to the market. That's tougher. And then within that, there's ways you can do it faster, and there's ways it takes longer. There are research recruitment firms and tools that researchers use. So I can log into a marketplace, and I can type parameters in around saying, I want to talk to this type of business, this type of person and role. This is their experience. And it goes to their population and tries to find these people and sends it back. These are the people you could talk to. There's a cost for that, but it's quick. The way I'm doing it right now is I have a list of names and firms and owners of those firms, and I'm just reaching out cold. All right.
Right.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm doing a research project. Now, what's great is they won't have any biases towards the company. They'll speak really frankly about the category. But it's a challenge to get them, that's a longer process to get insights. So, there's pros and cons to all of it. But I do, in the two scenarios you described, I do both.
Right. How difficult it is it to get people's attention? For example, if you're reaching out to somebody without any introduction at all, that's
It's tough.
yeah.
I mean, it's just like cold calling, right? In
Right.
some ways, the benefit I have, or the ace in my sleeve, is that I am a researcher.
That's
Now,
interesting.
some people, I mentioned a few minutes ago, some people are using that as a guise to pitch products, and
Right.
sometimes it still doesn't help me. But but also things go to spam. People get busy. I'm not a priority for people. I mean, even if they want to help, at the end of the day, life gets in the way. So there are customers, my clients' customers, who will reach out to, and they'll write back right away. Yeah, I'd love to participate. And then you don't hear from them for 2 weeks because life got in the way, but they still do want to help. But I'm not a priority for them. They have their business and their life is the priority. So it can be really tough to get people. That said, if you are someone that's looking to launch a company or launch a new product, try and go into a new market, that's the path, right? You're still going to be able to do things like go into communities, do some search engine work where you can see like trends of keyword searches. That stuff will help inform you and give you signal around like volume and appetite, what people are looking for. But the challenge in business to business, you still have Like you're a business that's integrating with another business somehow. How are you going to be their partner over whatever long term, whatever the terms of your contract are, whether it's a few months or a few years? You need to go in and talk to these people to understand how your businesses are going to partner together, right? Because that's still at the end of the day how deals get done. So you won't be able to avoid this work. At some point, you have to do it. There's just tricks though, and tips and tricks that you can do to at least help yourself be more successful.
Right. Fantastic. I think I've gleaned so many insights from our conversation today, Ryan. And what intrigues me the most is your career as an investigative reporter. I'm sure you have transitioned many skills from that career to this. How was the transition like?
It was actually pretty good because I started in the business world. I started in franchising. I actually worked for my family. That's my dad right there. And he owned his own company. I worked for him for a while. And I was like the director of operations and marketing. I started off in operations and sales. And then I was thrown the marketing hat when it was in my mid-20s. And I was like, ooh, I like this. This is fun. It's just, I could just feel my energy move towards it. But the reason I left was because it's a family business, and like a lot of family businesses, you start working really young in the family business. And I started, when I was like 12, worked in some of the franchise stores. And by the time I was 17 and 16, I was training franchisees and working with their operations team as a teenager. So by the time I hit 30, I'd almost done 20 years in hospitality by the time I was 30, which sounds crazy. But a lot of, that was like the first foray into B2B for me, because I was selling, at the end of it, I was like helping shape the franchise, selling franchises to franchisees, all the high level executive stuff that you do. But when I got to the end, I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I think I want to change. So I always liked media, and I went back to school. I took broadcasting, and I thought I was going to work in business again, to be honest. I was like, okay, I'm going to go work for a media company and be, some type of senior executive thing, and like work in their marketing department, maybe, I don't know. And I just happened to strike a conversation with one of the editors that was here in Ottawa that did news. And they said, you should come be a reporter. And I was like, I can't do that. You're crazy. And then, no, you'll be great. Come on in. So I did. And then I became an investigative reporter for almost 3 years, TV and radio. And that's where I'd always done customer research when I was started. When I worked in the food hospitality, I used to go into the stores, used to survey people. I do what they call observational work. So I used to like time people, how long they'd be in a queue, how long they'd put milk in their coffee, like things like that. Cause I'm trying to make the business better. Right. And then I would actually go into competitor stores, pretend I was a shopper, talk to customers, profile them. Like I was everything I could to understand how people thought, like why they made purchasing decisions the way they did. And the reason I mentioned that is when I got to media and became an investigative reporter, that just really took my skill set to a whole other level. Because how I approach this work now is very much how I approach it as an investigator. If you look at how lawyers, how, people who are in, police, in law enforcement, how they run investigations or how they extract insights is very much how reporters do it. And that's how I do it now. Like there's a very specific process I follow, which is very, like I said, timelines, actions, behaviors. I don't care about opinions. I care about like the process of how a thing got done. Right. So that really just catapulted my ability to do that. Also, like just environments of like being able to strike a conversation with people, learn something very quickly. So when I went back to the business world, it was a very helpful skill set to transfer over. Storytelling, right? Just how to, like, I had to file stories every single day. Imagine you had to write a blog and do a podcast every single day. And so we do that in journalism. I used to work on a show. We had 3 hours of radio we had to film every single day.
Wow.
So it's, you learn how to discern information quickly and get it out there. So there's all these skills that were great. And a lot of journalists actually have moved into marketing. And you can see them on LinkedIn, and they just do a lot of content, a lot of different marketing type activities.
Right. Actually, recently just finished this book from David Ogilvy, The Confessions of an Advertising Man. There is so much similarity in just what you said. He says most copywriters, ad campaign writers, start as writers or into the marketing function of the business, but very, very rarely they get into field sales. So as a young man, apparently he was going door to door in Scotland selling water heaters and boilers to people. So he said he understood a lot about human psychology, human behavior, objections, handling objections. I think, that's where you could transfer your skill sets from being a reporter to what you do now.
Yeah. And I also had to sell stuff before that.
Right. Yeah.
You know, one of the biggest mistakes, not the right word, one of the biggest opportunities marketers have is go spend a day with your sales team.
Right. Yeah.
Just watch how hard their job is. I've always known that, right? Because I had to sell $500,000 franchises to people back when in my 20s. So I knew the game as soon as I walked in. And that's what I like working with companies with have sales team, because my job in marketing is to help create an environment where the chances of them succeeding are higher. That's my job. Right. Now, if you get to like a product-led company where there's no real sales team and it's marketing, then your marketing helps the product team, because the product team is really the sales team, really, at the end of the day. But you work together in tandem because you own different sections of how the buying journey unfolds. So yeah, David Ogilvy is a legend. And if people, he has lots of great stuff to read. I think what's happening now is you see his name come up in B2B now a lot in the last few years, where he didn't 5 years ago. Right. And I think the reason is because of what I talked about earlier. The internet is now the default. Right. And there's probably I've posted on this before on LinkedIn, but the estimates of like how many software companies exist in the world is anywhere between 250,000 to 300,000. Right. It's probably way more than that. And there's new ones getting launched every day. So how do you compete in that world, right? Without like the fundamentals of marketing. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox there for a moment, but yeah, good for you for reading that book. That's awesome. Good choice.
Yeah. I just started this book called Hey Mr. Whipple, Squeeze This.
Okay.
That is by another copywriter. I think great insights into, because writing ads, direct copy, and whatever form of copy we write today, I think it sort of melded together so
Absolutely.
much. I think it falls back to the basic tenets of just being very simple, very straightforward. Talk about the benefits. Write to the audience.
Yeah.
I think that is where it boils down to, effectively.
Absolutely.
So, Ryan,
absolutely.
Before we close our conversation today, can you share a memorable customer interview from your recent?
I don't know. Like, I think I had one yesterday. Here's my mark of success for me when I'm doing this work. If I get from someone who I'm interviewing at some point, they say, "Oh, that's a good question," then I'm like, that is just like a dopamine hit for me.
Right.
And I sort of had that one yesterday with someone. Funny enough, I'm helping a franchise chain here in the United States do some work. So sort of back up my roots. And the person I spoke with at the end was like, they said, "You know what? You're a good interviewer." I'm like, I just live for that stuff because that's what I do. Right. So I think all of them are memorable. I think what I like the most is when I bring things to clients, when I do the aggregate of the work and I show them what people are saying and the things they didn't know. Because a lot of time when you do this work, you'll hear things that you already know, and that's okay. But there's so much you're going to uncover that you didn't realize. And I show people that, and their jaws hit the floor. And the really good marketing and sales teams get excited because now what you've done is you've taken away a lot of the assumptions and the guessing, or you get them like, I knew that. I had a hunch about that. And it's great to see it because there's only so
Right.
much time and money in a business. It's hard. Like there's
Right.
so much happening. And I see part of my role is how people make better decisions because they don't have unlimited time and budget. So you need the information, you need the best information you get your hands on to make the best decisions you can. So I know that doesn't really answer the question, like the memorable interview, but I like those are the things that make it memorable for me is, being able to help people like get the key insights they need.
Right. I think fundamentals are the strongest.
Yeah, I think
As
so.
they compound, it turns out to be a fantastic interview with your insights, stuff like that. I think I picked up a lot of interesting nuggets, rich nuggets from our conversation today, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time. And I 100% believe that our audience, the podcast audience, and my audience on LinkedIn will take a lot from this conversation. And one last thing, how can people reach you? Through LinkedIn, email, Twitter? Where can they find you?
I pretty much live on LinkedIn. Yeah, my wife thinks I'm crazy, but it's great. I love it there. So just type in Ryan Paul Gibson into LinkedIn. I will be the first person that pops up. I'm pretty sure of that. And my website is contentlift.io. And I have I have some free resources there. People can just grab them. Happy to. And I respond to most messages. I try to as much as I can. So if anyone has any questions, just reach out. Happy to help if I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ryan. And I wish you have a very pleasant and a productive day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.